All right, today we're going to be talking about the battle of the blogs. Put another way, should we be using the blog module or should we be using the web apps in Business Catalyst to build out the blogs? What is a blog? So this is really important to understand and to figure out what the components are if we're going to talk about, okay, the strengths and the weaknesses of the different ways to build it out. So is a blog something that is characterized as someone giving their opinion? Is it a blog because there's a category of posts? Is it a blog because there's an archive or tags or comments, or that it's updated often? Or is it because it's kind of like a journal or a diary? What are the things, what are the reasons, the components that make up a blog or to make a blog a blog? Well, if we look at the definition, a couple of different definitions that I found is, a blog is a journal or a diary that is on the internet. Well, that's a little broad. I can think of a variety of different ways, and maybe I can build a journal or a diary on the internet. Maybe that's more characteristic of kind of how it originally thought. But what we're thinking about blogs today, typically, at least in this setting, is we're thinking about it in a commercial sense, in a business sense. So a lot of times it's not really a journal or a diary of someone's life, although it could be, right? People have personal blogs, and that's great. And this discussion today could easily be around personal blogs as well. But I think a little bit better of a definition comes from Wikipedia, great resource, is that it is a discussion or informational site published on the web and consisting of discrete entries, otherwise known as posts, that are typically displayed in reverse chronological order. So this gives us a little bit more context of what a blog is, right? It says, okay, it's things that are placed in reverse chronological order. It provides information or a means of discussion, and it exists on the web. Okay. Still somewhat broad and still don't know all the things that can make up a blog. But if we go back to the previous slide, I think all of these things that I have here are generally things that are considered to be part of a blog. But a blog does not need to consist of all of these sorts of things. And before we get into talking about how to go about building a blog and what's the best approach, let's first ask the question, well, is Business Catalyst good for blogging? And the way I see it, absolutely yes. And there's three main reasons for that. One is the design freedom. As we all know, Business Catalyst allows us to really take our creativity to life. Anything that we can imagine in Photoshop, anything that we can build out in HTML and CSS and create with those web standards, we can accomplish in Business Catalyst. The CMS kind of gets out of the way, allows us to utilize those tools, and then just throw in tags where we feel the dynamic pieces, the content management pieces, should be able to inject themselves, right? So the great thing is, for blogging, we are not limited our creativity is not limited by the tool. The second is that Business Catalyst is SEO friendly for blogs. There are, maybe one or two small little things here that I wish Business Catalyst blogs had, but by and large, we can accomplish everything we need to from an SEO perspective. And those who have been around Business Catalyst for a long time probably really appreciate the work that the Business Catalyst team has done over the years to really make sure that not only the platform itself, but also the blogging component is very SEO friendly. And the third, which arguably might be, kind of the biggest differentiator, is that Business Catalyst is an all-in-one tool. So blogging isn't the only component of it. It also has other things like web forms and email marketing. And when it comes to blogging, typically when we're talking about, we're not just doing it for fun. There's a commercial reason for it. It's typically to drive some sort of action, or most typically to build an email marketing list. So the nice thing here is if we build a blog on Business Catalyst, we can easily put out web forms that collect people's information, and let's say subscribe them to an email newsletter list. But it doesn't just have to be one of those generic email newsletter subscribe forms, or hey, just subscribe to our blog, which you absolutely can do, and those are great. But we can do things like, hey, here's an ebook related to this particular topic about this blog post, and I want to promote that and have people sign up to get this, and then on that thank you page and in that autoresponder you can actually automate and give them the ability to download that ebook or whatever that material is. So that's kind of step one of the integrated email marketing. So it helps us generate and make our blogs a better marketing machine in terms of collecting that list. But what it also does is it helps us automate the email marketing as well. So one way to look at it is, let's say if I'm a weekly blogger, I know that every Sunday I'm going to put out a blog, and I'm not necessarily recommending Sundays, but just as a point of an example, right? Every Sunday I come out with a blog, and so I'm going to set up my Business Catalyst email marketing tool to have a weekly campaign that goes out every Monday, and that automatically, dynamically pulls in an excerpt from my latest blog post and puts it in the body of the campaign and a link over to the blog post. Now I can set that up once and forget it and know that every single Monday my audience is going to get my latest blog post. So that's great. That's fantastic. I don't have to take the time. I don't have to think about it. It just happens. The second thing is that maybe the blogging isn't the overall piece. Like, maybe it's the main goal isn't just to blast out your blogs, but you want to do maybe a drip campaign. After someone fills out that form that they found on your blog and that they download that great ebook, well, great. Now let's not just forget about that user. Maybe you want a drip campaign. So over the next 7 days, you want to provide additional education and resources and tips that go out automatically. So Business Catalyst has the way to automatically send out these campaigns based off of the user interactions. So, these three reasons I think really make Business Catalyst a great case for blogging. BC has gotten even better recently in terms of blogs, and there's two main reasons. One is the image field on blog posts. So this is a long-awaited feature, and it's honestly one of the biggest reasons why we use web apps for most of the blogs we've built out recently, because modern-day blogs really want images a lot of times. And I don't mean images in the body, I mean images in the actual layout, the list layout, when people are deciding which blog post that they want to read. So that's a huge update that happened to Business Catalyst recently that makes blogging on BC even better. The second is Liquid. So Liquid is for developers, so it is going to be for the more advanced people out there, but Liquid allows us to do a lot more things than we had the capability of doing before. Or even if we had the capability of doing it before, maybe with JavaScript, it makes it a lot easier to do it. So a few examples of how Liquid and module data have made blogging on BC even better is, here's three examples. So one is filtering by author. Second is being able to filter by tag. And the third is how to show tags for a specific blog post. So you might be thinking, oh, well, that seems kind of standard, right? Well, Business Catalyst had the ability with the blogging module to output a list of tags and to show, the number of blog posts that were associated with it, and then click on that to see all those posts that have been tagged like that. But there wasn't a way on a specific post, either in the list or the detail view, to output the tags that were just associated with that particular article. But thanks to BC Gurus and Dave Hagblad, they have recently come out with a tutorial on there that shows us how we can use module data in Liquid to actually show the tags for specific blog posts using the regular blog module within Business Catalyst. So we thought Business Catalyst was great for blogging before. Well, it's even better now. All right, so the question at hand, right, is, okay, Mike, I get it. Blogging is cool, and I want to do it, and I want to do it on Business Catalyst, but how do I know about going about it? Do I use the blog module, or do I use the web app and custom build it? Well, before we get into the specifics, because I am going to walk you through a checklist of how to go about this, I want to play a little bit of a guessing game. I want to show you some blogs that have been built out on Business Catalyst, and I want to hear from you. Do you think this was built via the blog module or the web app module? And then also, this kind of serves the purpose of showing you that a wide variety of designs can actually be achieved, with blogging on Business Catalyst. So let's get started, and please throw your answers out into the chat. The first one here is Sunset Pools. So let's take a look at this real quick. So we got a little date here, a name and the author, and then we've got image and description. And okay, we got some social sharing, showing some multiple blog posts here. Latest tweets on the side, recent posts, archive, tags, and then let's click on a particular post. Looks like we got to subscribe to RSS feed, and you scroll down, we got a little bit of information about the author, some discuss comments. So what do you guys think? Do you think this is built with the blog module or the web app module within Business Catalyst? Great, yes, we heard from a few, the blog module, and that is correct. So moving on to another example. So here's one for a legacy. So if we scroll down here, we see an image in the list view, we see the title and a little description, the date, and then who the author is, the tags here in the list view, the number of comments, and we scroll down and see, okay, some without images. On the right-hand side, we see categories and a Twitter feed. And we can go into one here and just see a little bit more information. So what do you guys think about this one? Do you think this is a blog or web app? Okay, yeah, so this one was mixed, and that's great because sometimes it is really hard to tell because both can accomplish very similar things. But I'd say the giveaway in this case for why this one is a web app is probably because of these tags in the list view. I'd say is one, and the fact that it doesn't have the the archive on the right. So, but that's not a for sure giveaway. But no, this website was built a few years ago, and Liquid and Dave's tutorial wasn't out there yet to tell us how to do those sort of things. So this was one that we used a web app to get some of these some of those customizations in there. Okay, next one. So here's the Chicago Digital Blog. So here we have a little bit more unique of a list layout, title, author, a little overview, and then we can go into a particular one. And we've got kind of the information up here in the header, and scroll down, we can see we've got some information about the author, learn more to our bio, previous, next, all that kind of stuff. So what do you guys think about this blog for Chicago Digital? Is this a web app or a blog module? Great, yeah, so this one actually is a web app. Part of the reason here is one is we want to be able to control the image in the header here, so we might want a different image in the header versus in the list view. Now that particular example didn't have that. We also wanted to be able to have a link over to the bio of the person as well, of the author, and have more information about the author. We also want a previous and next post, and so on and so forth. So yeah, this was actually built out as a web app. Okay, next one here. So this is for Monarch & Company. Here we've got kind of a title, date, an image in the list view, a little overview, the author. We can click on a post and see this here. We've got some topics and a search on the right. We got the latest, and some comments below. So what do you guys think about this one? All right. Yeah, this one is a blog. So I think some of you guys are starting to pick up on the patterns. Although this one could have been a little tricky because this actually was built a while ago and there wasn't the list view image in Business Catalyst, and so we're doing a little trick to get the list view, the image in the list view very, very nicely. So yes, but this is actually using the blog module. Now I have a bunch more examples, but I want to just end on one here. I don't want to do all of these. So we'll look at this one. So this site is actually, the entire thing is a blog. So if we look at up here, these are different blog categories. We scroll down, we can see we've got this kind of featured sort of list view. We've got tags in the list view here. Then we've got, let's go back to the home page. So we've got these big kind of overviews. Then we've got these smaller kind of overviews. We've got a list of contributors on the right-hand side here. If we click on one of these posts, if we scroll down, we can see related posts. I think if we go down here, you may also like. there's comments, there's this tag cloud over on the right hand side, recent tweets, etc. So what do you guys think about this one? Is this a web app or a blog? Yeah, so this one is actually hard to tell, I would say, because it has some things on it that make you think that it might be a blog. Like, for example, these tag clouds. Like, this is pretty hard to implement with a web app, for instance, and in putting in the list in the detail view. But then it also has things like all these different authors and author profiles, and these different list layouts that you're like, well, that seems like kind of a little bit more advanced. Not sure how to do that with the blog. So actually, this one is, in fact, a web app. So really kind of one of the big takeaways is that it is fairly hard to tell, because there are a lot of vlogs can be accomplished either or. And so part of the goal today is really to help you navigate through that fog and figure out, okay, when is it really the most appropriate time to use a web app and custom build a blog, or when I should just be using the blog module instead. So before we go any further, what I'd like to do is show you the back end of both experiences, so that maybe for those who are unfamiliar with these options can get a little bit better understanding of what we're talking about. So here I am in the back end of Monarch & Company, and I can see the different blog posts that they have here. So here we can see the list layout. It shows some tags and the author associated. I can click edit, and I can see some fields here, right? I've got my post name, the URL, I can change that, the featured image, I can put in my title and description for SEO. Here's my page content where I can use the WYSIWYG editor. I've got on the right a release date, some categories and tags associated with it. I can have multiple blogs associated with it, and I have a drop down of different authors. So here's the blog experience. Now if we go over to Think Legacy, if we go over to the web app blog experience, here you can see the list view is a little bit different. I see the name and just the creation date, and I can go into one and have a lot more options, a lot more fields. So in this particular one, it wasn't really apparent on the front end because they didn't actually have a lot of posts that represent the diversity of blog types that are available. But in this case, we created, standard, gallery, video, link, audio, quote. So the actual detail page or even the list view of the web app itself can morph and change based off of the type of blog post that this is. And then they can fill out the associated fields. And then of course down here we have our WYSIWYG editor, where we can, very similar to the blog, where we can throw that in. And then on the right hand side we've got kind of the standard toolbox in Business Catalyst where we can insert these other components. So this gives you a little bit better idea of kind of the two different interfaces. So they're not vastly different, but there are some subtleties here that we want to point out, because it is going to affect which one we decide to use when building out our blog. All right, so let's go over the advantages of the built-in blog module. First and foremost, it is easy to set up. Not only is it easy to set up for people who are new to Business Catalyst or who may not be advanced developers yet, but it's also for the advanced developers. It's also easier. And for in the second point here is that for simple features or for simple blogs, it takes less time. And so I think these points number 1 and number 2 are maybe some of the strongest arguments for using the blog module, because realistically we all have timelines and budgets and other constraints that we need to live by, and we can't maybe always have the luxury of building something custom and taking as much time as we want, and we really need a quicker solution. So that's the great thing about the blog module in Business Catalyst, is the Business Catalyst team has put together a blog, like a pre-built web app, if you will, that has a lot of the components that you would naturally want out of a blog, so that you can rapidly develop this and implement it into your website. But it doesn't have anything and everything that you might ever consider doing with the blog. But thankfully, that's where we have web apps and the freedom the capabilities of the platform to really develop whatever we want. So the third item here is that the items will automatically get added to the RSS channel. So this is just something that's not possible with web apps. And so what I mean by this is that as soon as we hit save on that blog post, it gets automatically added to the RSS channel. There's no extra step we need to do. When you create a blog, it automatically creates an RSS channel associated with it. So that just happens naturally. And the number 4 is that we can import items from WordPress and TypePad. So Business Catalyst has this import feature built in to the blog module, which is nice. Advantage number 5, that tags are easier to build for the developer because it's built in. I don't have to custom think through that whole tag functionality, and it's easier to manage for the client. So if we go back and look at the difference, here's the tag for the web app. I just put a comma separated list of tags, but I don't know like what were the other tags that were used on the website, and even if I knew, maybe I incorrectly typed it and now I've created a misspelled variation of that tag. That's not the most ideal necessarily. But if we go over to the blog, you can see that, oh cool, here I can see the list of tags that were used previously. If I decided, you know what, things we like, for instance, is not the best tag, I actually want to have a different one, I can throw in and add another one to the list and then check it. So I think this experience of managing tags for the user is a little bit better than with web apps. So that's another advantage of the blog module. And then number 6 is that the archive feature is built in. So the ability to see that there's 6 posts on December of 2015 and 4 posts in November and 3 posts in October and so on and so forth. That automatically archiving the post by month is something that is built into the blog module, and it's just going to take you a whole lot less time to implement that rather than doing it with a web app. Okay, but we know that there are some weaknesses of the blog, and there are some weaknesses that we can't overcome and we just have to live with, or we just have to know that that's going to cause us to use a web app. But there are certain weaknesses of the blog that we can overcome. Now, the first one is that the blog, we cannot transfer a post from one BC site to another. And the reason is there's no way to export blogs, or blog posts more specifically. So what's the use case here? Well, we're actually going through a project right now where the first website was built on Business Catalyst, but now we're building a new website. So we're going to do that in a dev environment, in a new Business Catalyst instance, right? So we're building everything there, and we're like, okay, great, we're going to build all the functionality, carry over the content. What about those hundreds of blog posts that were on the previous Business Catalyst website? We want those on the new website too. Well, manually copying those over is quite a chore, not necessarily something I recommend. So unfortunately, right, we can't export them out of Business Catalyst and then import them into another site. But thankfully, Backup BC, the app in the App Store, has recently come out with a new update that allows you to export your blog post from Business Catalyst, and it exports them in the way that can be read by the import tool when you select the WordPress option. So this is really great because now in a matter of minutes, I was able to then download all my posts and then import them into the other Business Catalyst version of that website. Another weakness of the blog is that advanced functionality is just not possible. If I want the blog to do anything other than what the blog was designed to do, then I can't do it. Well, that is no longer true because with liquid and module data, we can do a lot of the things that we thought were only reserved for web apps in the past, but we can now bring that functionality to the blog module. Yes, it takes some custom coding. Yes, it probably takes the same amount of work, if maybe not a little bit more, to do it on the blog than we did on the web app. But things like throwing in a related blog post or full author profiles, these are actually now possible with some advanced coding on top of the blog module. So if you really want to use the blog module and have some of these advanced features, it is now possible. Okay, so we've gone over the blog module, the built-in blog module. Now let's go over web apps and look at their advantages of web apps. Now, there are 2 different categories that I've broken these into. One is I call the Clinchers, and these are 10 reasons or requirements that will ensure that you have to use a web app over the blog module. So said another way, if any of these are true about your particular project or your website, then you are going to use a web app over the blog. So item number 1, clincher number 1, is that the web apps can be user submitted by members that are logged into a secure zone. So let's take an example. Let's say you're a chamber of commerce and you have a bunch of businesses that have memberships and log into your website for a variety of different reasons. And one of the benefits of being a member of that chamber is that you get to contribute articles, your information, your knowledge to the blog of the chamber, right? So if I wanted to give the people the ability to do that, to log into our website, the front end of the website, right, behind a secure zone, and then craft a blog post and then submit it, I can do that via web apps. And I can even put in moderation rules that says, okay, great, I'm going to get the submission, but I'm not going to automatically post it. I'm going to put in an approval workflow here to make sure someone reviews this and then publishes it. The second item is that only web apps can be put behind a secure zone in terms of not only web apps out of all the BC functionality, but just versus the blog post through a blog module. So web apps can be put behind a secure zone. Now, I don't think this is such a great use case. We haven't personally ran into a situation where someone wants a blog just behind a secure zone, so only for a particular set of users rather than the public. But if this in fact is a use case in your scenario, then you will want to use a web app instead of the blog module. Item number 3, clincher number 3, is that if you want different post types, so if you're going to have videos and slideshows and audio and image and text, and just like we saw on that Think Legacy website, if we want to have those different options and easily give the user the ability just to give us the video or give us the audio or give us the images, and then automatically craft that functionality and that style and those different list views around that, then we're going to need to use a web app. Item number 4 is if we want the list view image and the main detail view images to be different. So we love the fact that we now have a featured image inside the blog module within Business Catalyst. But this is really just one image, right? And we can show that image in the list view and we can show it on the detail view, but it's going to be that same image. But if we want different images, then we are going to need to use a web app. Now let's look at a good use case for that. So if we go back to the Chicago Digital blog here, so sell better deals to better clients. So this is actually a wonderful presentation that Devin Reel gave about this, and the content is from the UGurus 10K bootcamp, which is fantastic. So if we look at the list view here, we can see that it's kind of like this white image with the PowerPoint slide on here, and maybe that's fine for here. But let's say if we get to this point and we actually want a header image. Now we don't have a header image, but if we said we wanted to have one, not only would that, I feel like that image not really look the best up here because it's kind of like text on top of text, and that whole white thing isn't really going to work well with this theme. We really want a different image here, and that different image could be maybe something a little bit more appropriate. Maybe it's like a picture of Devin or whatever in here. But let's just say, even for one of these posts where maybe this Google's push for mobile, for instance, of this picture of me giving a presentation, maybe that picture would be fine up here, but the dimensions of throwing that into this top area is so vastly different from this that I actually really might even want a different version of this picture to upload, especially if we're looking at performance optimization and only ensuring that we just have the absolute right size of the image, and we're not like overshooting the size of the image and like scaling it down for instance. Okay, clincher number 5 is if we want to define a custom alt tag for the featured image. So these are for the SEO buffs out there that want absolute full control over stuff. So we like I said, we can have a featured image in Business Catalyst now. We can output that, but we can't define the alt tag for that image. So if that is something that we desire, that's something that we want to do, then that is something we're going to need to use a web app for. Number 6 is that if we want, or our client wants, to use the module toolbox in the editor. And let's describe what I mean visually. So if we look at the Monarch & Company blog that, remember, is using the blog module, we can see that we've got the WYSIWYG editor, but we don't actually have the module toolbox in here. However, if we go over to the Think Legacy one, which is a web app, you can see that we now have this module toolbox on the side. So for example, if I wanted to, in this blog post, to pull in a web app item that's like a testimonial right in here, then I can kind of use this interface to do so. Or maybe I wanted to pull in a photo gallery or something else. Well, now I have the ability to do so. So there could be different use cases around here of why you might want the client to utilize this. And so if you do, then that's something that you will need a web app for. Number 7 is you can separate release date from display dates. So for example, if we're going back to the Chicago Digital blog, is let's say the June 30th, 2015. Like this is actually the date of this particular presentation, but it wasn't the date that we actually released the blog post on the website, because it took us like a while to actually get all this stuff together and create it. And we could have set the release date to something different, like in November, for instance, and that's fine. That's what you may want to do. But if you have the desire to have your display date different than the actual date that it goes live on the website, well, then that's something you're going to need a web app for, because the regular blog module just has a release date, and you can output that release date, but you can't get it different than that date. So and with a web app, we can define a separate field that is the display date, and it's different than the release date. Number 8, if you want to define specifically the overview that shows up in the list view. So going back to the Chicago Digital one, this is a fairly good example. So if we go back to this detail view, for instance, we can see there's a lot of information in here. And generally speaking, a lot of times blog posts you may show all of this in the detail view, or maybe you show like the first couple of paragraphs in the list view, and then you link to the full one. But I think sometimes that's good, and that's kind of natively, I think, how a lot of blogs work. But if you're like, kind of our first paragraph here may not really be the best paragraph to kind of like convince someone, to click and read this blog post if they're browsing right here. So if I actually want to control and make this something different than like the first paragraph of the actual blog post, and I want to have custom control over that, well, then that's something I need a web app for. Number 9, if you want multiple list views, or in other words, a featured post. So if we go back to the Your Zen Life and we look at this, so this is one of the giveaways that this one is a web app, is that we have this list view right here, this kind of feature list view, and then we've got this smaller list view right here for some of the other posts. And then I think if we go back to here, no, that's a smaller one again, but let's click on this recipe for clean pasta. And we can see now we have another list view for the you may also like articles. So if you want to accomplish things like this on the website, that's using the web app is the way to go. And then number 10 is that web apps, the authors do not need to be associated to admin users. So why do we care about that? Well, because there's pricing associated with user licenses within Business Catalyst. So if my use case is that I've got maybe 3 people that are going to be updating and like maintaining the website in the back end, but I might have a network of like 100 people that contribute content to that blog, and maybe they email me, or they do it through some sort of other mechanism. I don't want to give them access to the back end of the overall website. I just want them to to be able to contribute posts, and for me to give them credit and associate them with that post when I launch it. So it really doesn't make sense for me to add them as an admin user and have pay for 100 user licenses in that case, right? So if we need our authors if we need authors that are not associated with admin user licenses, then we need a web app. Okay, now moving on to other advantages of web apps, but these are not absolute deal breakers as to why you wouldn't use the blog module, because these web apps, these advantages rather, are things that maybe can be overcome with the weakness of the blog can be overcome or worked around, or these things can actually just be accomplished with blogs as well. So number 1 is full author profiles. Now this is arguably a little bit easier to do with web apps, but is also now something with Liquid and module data that we can accomplish with the blog module if we want. To expand on that, your actual author profile, like that detail page, is going to be a web app, but you can link that web app with the blog post module, again, using Liquid. Number 2 is export and import via Excel. Like we talked around a way to overcome this weakness using the Backup EC app. But again, this is something that's natively part of web apps, is that you can export and import via Excel. Number 3 is the pagination on the detail view. So what do I mean by that? If we go back to the Chicago Digital blog on Business Catalyst, right? You see a previous post and a next post. again, this is something much easier done. What used to be much easier done on web apps, but now with Liquid is something that can be done on both. Easier to assign posts to multiple RSS channels. Okay, so one of the strengths of the blog is that it automatically publishes to RSS, but it's kind of also one of its weaknesses in the sense that I can't control what RSS channels it posts to. So you might have a blog where you want people to subscribe to maybe different categories of the blog, or maybe different authors post specifically, and you have different RSS channels set up for those. Well, the downside of the web app is that it doesn't automatically publish to the RSS channel. You can manually go and associate it with it. But the nice thing is, if you do have the use case where you need multiple RSS channels and a blog associated with multiple, then it's much easier to do with a web app, because that selection is right within the interface itself. So if we go over to let's say Think Legacy one, and we can go over to syndicate and share using RSS, and we only have one over here, but here we can see all of the RSS channels, and we can bring those over and manually associate that. We don't have that option with blogs, and so it's more difficult and time consuming to then go over to RSS channels and to manually add the items. It can be done, but again, it's not a deal breaker, but it's just something that is easier done via web apps. Number 5 is if you want recommended or related posts. Again, you can do this with blogs through some advanced functionality, but it's a little bit easier to do this with web apps because we can use the data source fields. I don't think we have it set up on this one, but it'd be similar to doing a drop down right here of selecting. So this could be a drop down of all your other blog posts, and you just select the one that you'd like to be showing up as a related post. So that's easier done via web apps. Okay, well, like blogs, it does come with its weaknesses. So what are some of the weaknesses of web apps, and how can we overcome them, right? Well, so number one, we kind of already talked about this, is you cannot auto-publish to RSS, but you can manually assign to RSS channels. So, I think this is one of those weaknesses that maybe a whole lot of people are not going to really care about, as long as you tell the person who's maintaining the blog that after every post, as part of your checklist of, adding a blog post to the website, you make sure and just go and click actions and add it to the RSS feed, then I think that's a pretty easy weakness to overcome. The second is that there is no way to easily export WordPress export WordPress blog posts and import them into Business Catalyst. There isn't that nice import feature for web apps. However, you can find a plugin for WordPress that exports the post to CSV, and CSV, right, comma separated values, that can easily be thrown into the the import template for web apps, and then you can map those items and then import them into Business Catalyst. So I don't think that's not a big weakness of web apps that you can't overcome as well. So don't let that one stop you either. The third is that maybe the biggest weakness of web apps is that you're kind of custom building out things that the blog module may already have, and so it takes longer, right? So the way to overcome this weakness, if you do a bunch of different projects, is to write your code in a way that is more easily transferable from one project to the next, and reuse that code from previous projects. So maybe the first time you build out that web app blog and you needed the tags, is going to be a little bit of a pain because you haven't done it before. It's going to take a while to implement that tag feature, which the blog module has built in. But once you do that first time, you should then, the next time you have a project where you need to build out the blog and it has some of these advanced, these web app clinchers that mandate that you have to use a web app, but you still need that tag functionality. Well, great. Now let's borrow that from our previous project that we did, implement that, and we can make that development quicker. So, in those two lists, you did not hear me talk about social sharing or comments. And the reason is there are some independent best practices that we use when we build out blogs that it does not matter whether we're using the blog module or we're using the web apps. And that is, for social sharing, we prefer to use the Add This external plugin. And for comments, we use Discuss, Both of these are free tools that are, I think, kind of industry standards for implementing these sort of features into a website, and we definitely recommend using them over kind of the built-in social sharing and commenting options. The main reasons here, real quick, is I think the ease of implementation for Add This is great, and the variety of different options that you get, but then also the analytics and reporting that comes with it, and it all automatically integrates with your Google Analytics and tracks events when people share stuff. So that's awesome. And then on the Discuss side is the spam filtering has got to be like one of the biggest reasons to use it, but then also the fact that it's kind of a social network in itself, and putting Discuss on there gives extra visibility to your blog post, and it also has the ability to have like a related post section right below the comments, so people can discover other articles. So I'd say the spam protection, the moderation rules, and the discoverability of your posts by using Discuss are good reasons why we use that. So no matter what, whether you're using either of the options, these are the things that we recommend. But by no means do you have to use these. All right, so we've talked about quite a lot of information. We've gone over the strengths and the weaknesses of blogs. We've gone over the strengths and the weaknesses of web apps. But I'm not sure I've provided a whole lot of clarity as to the decision process for when to use what. So I want to simplify that for you and really get clear on how to decide on whether we're using a web app or a blog. So the first step that we want to do is we want to review the 10 web app clinchers. Okay, so let's go back and review those real quick. So it can be user submitted by members logged in a secure zone. If our blog needs to be put behind a secure zone, if we need different types of posts, if we need different list view image and a detail image, if we need to put in a custom alt tag, if we need the module toolbox in the editor, if we need to separate the release date from the display date, if we need to define specifically the overview in the list view, if we need multiple list views, or if our authors need to be separated out from admin users. If any of these are true, then we stop here, we say we need to use a web app, and that's our decision. Great. However, if you do not need any of those clinchers, if all of those are not true, then our decision becomes a little bit more difficult. All right, so we're going to want to review the blog module advantages, the web app advantages, and overcoming weaknesses of both to really assess the situation. Now, I can't give you a nice little decision tree that says this is exactly when you should use which in each situation, because everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different. I don't know the constraints of your project. Is pricing and keeping at a lower budget more important to this project, or is making the interface the absolute easiest it can be for the admin user the ideal? So there, and then also I don't know how, what the timeline is for delivering the project, right? So the point here is that by looking at the advantages and how to overcome the weaknesses, you can kind of figure out which and look at the project priorities and kind of figure out how those align and which one makes the most sense. But that answer really doesn't satisfy me a whole lot, because it doesn't give a whole lot of clarity to the situation if we don't run into one of these clinchers and know that we need to use a web app. So I want to give you kind of two rules of thumb that we use to kind of say if it should be a blog or if it should be a web app. All right. So generally speaking, if we do not have one of those clinchers, and if a blog needs tags and archive, we typically say let's use the blog module, because these things are already built in to the blog and they're easy to implement. And maybe we have some of those maybe some of those other things that are kind of favor web apps a little bit, but we can outweigh the amount of time it takes to do that and build that advanced functionality on top of the blog versus redoing tags and archive onto web apps. And we can see, okay, hey, which one's going to take us less time, cost us less, or maybe if those things aren't the primary focus, but we're like, hey, what's going to be the better user interface, then maybe we go with the other option. But generally, as a rule of thumb, if the blog needs tags and archives, we recommend using the blog module. Another rule of thumb is that if the blog does not need any of the web app advantages, use the blog module. So kind of said another way, if it's a simple blog, let's use the blog module. It's kind of what it's designed for. It's designed to get us up and running with the blog very quickly. So if we don't need the clinchers, if we don't need any of these advantages of a web app, then why, let's not even have this conversation, right? Let's just use the blog module. So I hope these two rules of thumb kind of give you a little bit more clarity on some decision points that you can make around it. But kind of reviewing this real quick is review the 10 web app clinchers. And if any of those are true, you're going to use a web app. If not, we want to review the advantages and disadvantages and how to overcome those weaknesses of the two different approaches and weigh those against our priorities of the project, and then use these two rules of thumb. So I hope you guys have a little bit more clarity as to which direction to go with your next project that involves a blog, and hope you enjoy blogging on Business Catalyst as much as we do. It's definitely one of those features that seems to be part of most websites that we build. So enjoy blogging out there with Business Catalyst.